Okay, let's see. Just waiting for everybody to join in. We will get started in just a minute. All right. Well, I've got 1 minute after 7, so we will go ahead and get started. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. I am super excited that you could join us on this webinar. We have an incredible new program at Levine in our EC that I am super excited for you guys to all learn about. And to explain more about this, we have Amy Ornelas. She's with D.O.T.S for Kids. Amy is a registered occupational therapist, and she is the owner and director for D.O.T.S for Kids. And we have partnered with her for several years now, so I'm super excited to have her partnering with us for this grant. We also have Andy Blum, our school counselor extraordinaire. She does so much behind the scenes in our classrooms, and this new program that we have really kind of adds to what Andy does and builds on what she does. And so I'm just really excited for the two of them to talk to you about what is happening in our classrooms. So Amy, if you want to go ahead and start the presentation.
Okay. Okay, first of all, I wanted to tell everybody how excited I am to be at Levine and to be at such a great school and to meet all your wonderful children. This grant is kind of amazing and a little bit of a blessing and couldn't have come at a better time. I feel like with COVID and everything, this is so needed. So I was very excited about this and feel really passionate about how OT can help with all of that social emotional regulation. And so we're going to start by kind of going over some of the objectives that we have for the grant. So kind of we're looking at improving our students' self-awareness on how their bodies are feeling, promoting their ability to self-regulate, providing also our teachers with some tools to help students self-regulate, and to improve students' overall kind of social emotional wellness. I think the best place for us to start is what is occupational therapy. People are very confused at what occupational therapists do. If you're in a hospital, occupational therapists frequently work on hand rehab or rehab of the upper body. From a pediatric standpoint, occupational therapy takes a more developmental approach, and that's why it is so big in pediatrics, because it focuses on kind of the full circle of development for children. So the role of OT and the concept of OT with occupation is that it encompasses the activities that occupy people's time and give meaning to their daily lives, hence the term occupations. So people are like, what are the occupations of children? Children don't have jobs. So the things that we look at when we're talking about occupations for children is we look at activities of daily living. So they're expected to get up, get dressed, brush their teeth, eat, brush their hair, I mean, eventually always. And then the next step is being able to participate in a school environment and learn. And also play and leisure is a huge part of children's social, emotional, and physical development. And then social participation. So that, I hope, kind of clarifies a little bit of what OT is and how occupational therapy relates to children. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the importance of self-regulation. And this is important for not only OTs, but parents, teachers, for all of us. For children to participate in their daily occupations, they must be able to regulate all of their bodies. And so what OT does is it targets that self-regulation by addressing what we call the sensory needs of a child. And so sometimes when people hear sensory needs, they're like, oh my goodness, and they're scared by that. But what sensory is, it's a little bit complicated. So I'm going to try and hopefully give you guys a little bit of a snapshot of what sensory does. And we're going to take questions at the end too, because again, this is a lot of information. What sensory integration does is it's the process of the brain organizing and interpreting the experiences of our daily life through touch, movement, body awareness, sight, and sound. And what we have to do is, I like to think of a computer kind of in regards to this. What our bodies are doing is they're taking in all these senses, which is the input. Our brain or our nervous system is interpreting these senses, and then we get an output. So the output's either functional or dysfunctional sometimes, but it's often based off of that input from the sensory systems. And then if it's processed incorrectly, the output may not be exactly what we need. So we try to regulate what that sensory input is, giving it more or less to help the nervous system process and produce a functional output, essentially. So to process sensory input, our body must integrate information that we receive through all of our senses. Sensory integration provides a foundation also for higher level learning, development, and behavior. So we all want our children to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And what we're going to find out, there's a nice slide later, is that X, Y, and Z are at the top of the pyramid, but the sensory systems are at the base of the pyramid. So we want to focus on building and strengthening our children's base through sensory input to allow them to do some of those higher level learning and socialization and motor tasks. So sensory integration dysfunction, when a child has difficulty processing and organizing sensory information, they have what we call sensory integration dysfunction. And what I like is this quote, when the flow of a sensation is disorganized, life can be like a rush hour traffic jam. This picture, this quote, all of it, I love it because all of us can associate with this. We know how our body feels from a stress and anxiety standpoint when we're in rush hour traffic and how horrible that feels. So imagine our kids having the same kind of a feeling, but not having the ability to verbalize what they're feeling or how they're handling any of this. So oftentimes what it comes out as behavior, if they're unable to interpret the information and they just have this buildup of stress and anxiety. Some children can actually almost go through their day in a sense of fight or flight to where they're not able to make good choices, or they are being impulsive because they aren't able to slow down enough because they are overstimulated. And so this again directly impacts their ability to be successful with participation in the school environment, social environment, peer environment, and even play. So just to kind of go, the next 5 or 6 slides go a little bit more in depth within sensory, just because I want to give you guys just a general idea of how the sensory systems all work. So when we say there's deficits to sensory input, sometimes we have people that are sensory defensive or hypersensitive to sensory input. So that means they need less input for their brain to register. Then we have people that are sensory seekers and they're hyposensitive to that input. Their bodies need more of that input for their brain to register. And so this is when we're going to be able to look at some of our kids and see what they're doing and say, gosh, why are they doing that? Why are they constantly doing that? Well, then you say, well, they're constantly moving because they are hyposensitive to movement input. So they are seeking all of that input. Or if they're hypersensitive, they are avoiding different input because it's too much. So again, when we look at all the sensory systems, we're going to look at how kids can either be hypersensitive or hyposensitive to that different sensory input. So the sensory subsystems kind of go beyond the basic senses of taste, smell, sight, and sound. Sensory integration addresses the senses of the nervous system. And so we look at what we call the tactile system for touch, the vestibular system for movement, and the proprioceptive system for deep pressure. We're going to go in depth into each of those a little bit more. So the tactile system, which is for touch, is a system that responds to touch, pressure, vibration, temperature, and pain. So examples of over or under or overreactive to touch. You've got our kiddos in preschool that are touching everybody, touching everything. They may be the kiddos that are hypo-responsive to touch, and they need more of that touch input for their body to feel regulated. Or you have the kiddos that are overreactive to touch. You put your hand on their back and they don't like it, or they don't want anybody to touch them. Those kiddos are hypersensitive to that touch input. And so you can see, if you start looking at it from that perspective, when you observe a behavior, instead of it being like, Bobby doesn't want to be by anybody, it's like, no, Bobby doesn't like it when they touch him unexpectedly. So it's not taking it to like, he's avoiding the kids, but why is he avoiding? He's avoiding because they're touching him. So how can we then address that with Bobby so that he can engage or interact with others? Also, this system has decreased sometimes pain awareness or increased pain awareness. Aversions to textures and tags. We've all had our kiddos that sometimes only want to wear one shirt, can't have seams in their socks. I had one family and the mom literally said she washed the same shirt every single day because that was the only shirt the little girl would wear, until it was almost like transparent. You could see through the shirt. So again, she was very sensitive to the touch, and that was what it was. We even have parents sometimes who will say, oh, my kid's not sensitive to touch at all. We have to buy the no seam socks. We have to do this, this, and this. And what the parents have actually done is compensated for that child's tactile defensiveness by providing some of, the support resources. Feeding difficulties are also related sometimes to tactile, because that aversion to texture and so on is really heightened in the mouth. So sometimes this can be related to feeding difficulties if it is a texture-based feeding difficulty. And then some of our kiddos that avoid messy play, they just can't stand the touch of it, or the kiddos that are overly messy and they love it, they need more, and the other kids maybe need less, or that messiness feels so aversive to them, they want to just avoid it altogether. And again, getting messy and getting dirty and touching things is a part of learning, especially in pre-K. The next sensory system is my favorite. It's the vestibular system. It's the system that responds to changes in movement in the head and the body position. So basically, when your body's moving, your ears have semicircular canals that basically process the fluid in there to tell your body how it's moving, and your body responds to that. So we all have the preschool kiddos, and so they are movers and shakers just by nature because they're little and they're really active. But a kiddo that may have more of a vestibular need is a kiddo that may get dizzy really quickly, easily, or all the time. That kid might be hypersensitive to movement input, so they end up getting dizzy and or sick, motion sickness, which is the next one. Or then you have the opposite, the kiddo that appears to be constantly on the go and cannot stop. Again, we want our kiddos to be active, but what we don't want is for the constant action to inhibit them from being able to do what they need to do. So sitting in circle time, transitioning from one activity to another, being aware of the people around them. So again, where the intervention might happen is if that constantly on the go is inhibiting their ability to get through the day or do what they need to be doing. Expressing fear or discomfort when feet leave the ground, that's it's called gravitational insecurity. And so that's related to the vestibular system. So kiddos that don't like to walk across the little wobbly bridges at a park, or maybe not liking to swing, they don't want to put their feet up. Some kiddos will avoid climbing activities, or they'll do the opposite and they'll take extreme risk-taking behaviors because they want more of that input. This can lead to low muscle tone and or poor coordination when you have some dysfunction within this particular system. So again, kind of looking at how the sensory systems also impact motor performance. The last system that we're going to talk about is the proprioceptive system. And this system is how the body responds to information, deep pressure from joints, muscles, tendons, and ligaments. So these are our kiddos that like to be rough and tumble or wrestle or constantly, like they're a bull. I call my bulls in my china cabinet. So what they're doing is they're being rough, but they're not necessarily being rough to be mean. They're being rough because their body needs more of that input to register. And so again, the concept of sensory is, okay, how can we give their body more of that proprioceptive input to register that won't require them to run into, bump, knock down, their peers, so that the kids want to play with them. These are our kids that like to hug or like hold you really tight. Later in life, sometimes they're the ones that write with really, really deep pressure. They're often the ones that take risk-taking behaviors. They're going to jump from the tallest thing in a park, and it's going to scare you to death, because guess what? When they land, that impact is going to be intense, and that's what their body needs. These kiddos, since they need more, they often have trouble with motor planning, or they can be clumsy because it takes more input for their body to register where they are in space. So the sensory motor connection is, in order to learn new motor tasks, you have to have accurate information from all the sensory systems. You have to be able to process it, and then you get a motor output. So kind of like what I talked about earlier, that pyramid, the sensory systems are truly at the base of that. And this next slide I love, and I'm going to give you guys a minute to look at it. But it just says here over, on the left, you look at the auditory, vestibular, proprioceptive, tactile, and visual systems, and they're the underlying things, or the base of what we need for our kids to get all these things in the middle. I'm not going to go over them all, but I want you guys to look at them. And then what we're all looking for is those end outputs or end products. And so we can't always ask our kids to produce that end product if we don't have the underlying groundwork or framework for them to build the skills in between before they get that product. So I hope that give you guys another couple minutes to look over that. That's a really beneficial slide, just to understand the importance and kind of everything that goes into as parents. We're like, oh, why can't you just sit down and concentrate? Why can't you focus? Well, it takes a lot for our kiddos to get to that point. And so we want to make sure that we're providing them with what they need to be able to get to some of those end products. Okay, so providing sensory information is important to maintain your optimal level of arousal throughout the day. So again, in our preschool, this is very important. A child's ability to adapt and behave appropriately and learn is completely dependent upon their level of arousal. This is no different than an adult. All of us have the same things. We've just oftentimes, all of us have sensory needs, adults, children, every single person has them. We have just developed strategies that allow us to compensate or be more successful in what we do. So for example, there might be some of you guys out there that are like avid runners, and you're like, I am a much nicer person or better person when I run. You're probably somebody that needs more proprioceptive and vestibular input, and you have found a functional activity that provides you with that for your optimal level of function. Also, some adults, who are in office spaces will, get in quieter rooms or dim the lights or have a soft noise in the background. Those people have then adapted their environment to promote their body with the sensory information it needs or doesn't need to get optimal level of function. Our kids are not able to do that independently. And so that is where the education to you guys and to the teachers helps us kind of figure out what the kiddos needs and what we can give them to allow them to get to that optimal level, because they're not to the point where they can do it on their own at this point. So that brings us to the ALERT program, and that's the program that we're starting to incorporate at Levine. We've already started to incorporate it at Levine. It's a program that was created by two occupational therapists, Mary Sue Williams and Sherry Schellenberg. And the program is designed to help school-age children with self-regulation. It helps the children learn to identify their arousal levels and then choose strategies to either alter their level or to get to an optimal state. I really like this program because it really is, when I say user-friendly, it's a really easy program for us to implement with students and teachers and families with some nice, simple terminology that children really relate to well. We look at it and it's called How Does Your Engine Run? And so it talks about your body's engine having 3 engine levels. Your body's engine can be high or fast. Your body's engine can be just right, or your body's engine can be low or slow. So those are the 3 engine levels that How Does Your Engine Run or the ALERT program target or identify. The very first thing we teach the kiddos when we teach the names and we introduce the engine program to them is that all the engine levels are good. You want to be able to be fast and high, and when you're running outside on the playground or when you're at a party at Pump It Up. And you want to be slow and low when it's time to go to bed. And then you might need to be just right when you're sitting at the table trying to complete an activity. So that's why this is a good way to, have the teachers be able to use that terminology with the kiddos in class. All of the change part is the harder part. So you teach the kiddos. The first step is teaching the kid. Well, the first step was we've done an in-service to the teachers to explain the program more in depth than we're going tonight, to explain it to the teachers, to kind of give them an idea. And then we post and we use the little speed dials in the classroom. And then we can start using the terminology with the kiddos within the classroom. For example, I was in a classroom, gosh, it was about a month ago, and they were getting ready for lunch. And I saw the speed dial up there, and I'd come with them from PE. And I said, while they're getting ready for lunch, can I just sit down and can we do an engine check-in? And so I said, can you guys, we reviewed the engine dial, and then I had them all go around and tell me how their engine was feeling. And this was a 3s class too. Or no, I'm sorry, it was a 4s class. But so then the next week I came back in the classroom and this sweet little boy said, hi, my engine is high today. And I was just shocked because it was like, I was like, he only saw me that one time and that's the only time we did it. But he remembered who I was and associated it with that speed dial and accurately identified where his engine was. So again, when I say very user-friendly, it's a program that's, again, pretty easy for kids, parents, and teachers to incorporate using uniform terminology that the kids relate to. The trickier part of the program is then, okay, great, my kiddo can identify where their engine level is, but how do you get them to change their engine level? And so that's one of the things that takes a little bit longer, and it's really unique to each child, classroom, teacher, and resources that we have. So that's one of the things that we're working on at Levine. Like if we have some kiddos that need a little bit more movement input, what can we do to provide them with that? What can we do to provide them with more proprioceptive or tactile input? And so kind of using those strategies that after the kids learn how to identify where their body's engine is, the teachers are able to make suggestions of appropriate strategies to use when they need to be able to what we call adjust their engine level. So it's time for nap. It's your engine's really high. That's not bad. Your engine's really high, but we need to try to get your engine down a little bit so that your body can calm down and take a nap. I think that maybe we need to, run up and down the hall or push a big heavy laundry basket down the hall and back to kind of get your body prepared to be calm and be able to take a nap. Instead of saying this kid's engine's up here, it's nap time, Johnny, it's nap time. And that kid's not going to fall asleep or be able to stop their body in general just because they're stuck. We can't just say it's nap time and have him adjust. We have to be able to help give strategies for the kids to be able to adjust that engine level. So again, the first step is developing just that sense of body awareness through the terminology of the alert program, which I think that's incredibly empowering as well, because I feel like in today's society, that is something that people lack, is just taking the time to figure out how they feel and how that impacts themselves or others. And then later on down the line, the kiddos being able to pick up on strategies or just different things that are more effective for them to change their engine levels, or having teachers be able to provide things within the classroom to adjust engine levels. But what I'm trying to say is it's very empowering for the kids once they are able to identify and know that they are able to regulate their levels to some extent. I've had some kiddos come into my clinic and they're 8 or 9 years old, and I'll introduce this program and they'll say, my engine's always high. My engine's never been low. I don't know what it feels like for my engine to be low. And as crazy as that sounds, it's true. Like some of them, their bodies are in this constant heightened state and have been for so long, they don't know. And so that becomes an exploration of exposing them to things and helping them identify how to get their bodies slower. So that is it for me. And now we'll let Andy.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. Can you flip the slide, Amy, for me?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so what I do, it's great. I love that Amy has come in to do this program because I feel like it partners so well with what I do in the classroom. Most of you probably already know who I am because from Bright Reels, I go into the 3s and pre-K classes once a week. And we talk about self-regulation as well, and emotions and problem solving, skills for learning, that kind of thing. And it really partners well with what Amy was talking about, because children who can self-regulate are better able to participate and benefit from learning. So whenever I go into a class, the first thing that we do is we breathe. And we're teaching them how to regulate their emotions. So I start with this book. It's called Breathe Like a Bear. And we have like, imagine a candle or a flower. And I teach them how to do those deep breathing. So in through the nose, out through the mouth, where you can feel those belly breaths. And we talk about that when you're having a strong feeling, you're in this part of your brain and you don't think clearly. So we want kids to be able to think from their executive functioning and to be able to think clearly. So part of what I do that adds on to Amy is what Amy does is the emotional management piece of it. So if kids can name what they're feeling, then they are able to handle that feeling. So we're really learning to identify the feelings, even in 3s. I mean, as young as they are, they can identify those feelings. So I do it in several different ways. I have my feeling buddies, if you can see them. This is anger, and anger says, I'll rant and I'll rave, something's bothering me. Nothing will change until I breathe. And I'll have the kids walk around with the anger and they breathe with it. Or I brought disappointment, which, because every child feels that way. And they say, I was hoping to get my way, but I can handle it. And then we can talk about what happens when they don't get their way. Amy, can you do the next slide for me? Amy, can you do the next slide? One second.
Sorry.
So while she's doing it, I can show you. When I come in to do my lessons, if she shows it on the screen, I'll show them a card like this. So that was the next slide. This is a more advanced one, but the kids will see that and I'll say, how do you think they feel? And how do we know that they feel that way? Because you look at their faces, right? And if it's a happy face, they're smiling and their eyes are a little bit down. And if it's a sad face, they might be looking down. And then I'll ask them if they ever have felt that way. And how do you know you feel that way? And we can also talk about when you feel angry, what happens in your body? Your heart beats fast, your face gets red, so that they know when they're having that. And we talk about having a little feeling or a big, strong feeling. And when we have a big, strong feeling, we have to be able to regulate and to take a deep breath to calm down. So really being able to identify how they're feeling and name that feeling helps them to be able to handle the feelings later on, or, whenever they have them. So this one is towards the end of the curriculum. These 2 boys are fighting because they both want to be the doctor. So once they've calmed down, then they can problem solve. And kids that can problem solve have better friendships, right? And kids that can identify feelings in other people can show empathy. And that's really what we want for our kids. I also have puppets that I use with them. And usually the puppets, this is my puppet, Beth. You'll sometimes see me with her, Roger. And they used to wear masks. And they were having some kind of conflict. She wanted to do Play-Doh, he wanted to read a dinosaur book. So what do? And these are real life situations that come up. So with Amy, when she's talking about their engine level, so this is like the naming the feelings in themselves and others, the child can then handle the feelings. So I would say, how do you think he's feeling? How do we know he's feeling like that? His hands are going like this. His face is doing this. She's upset. Her tower fell down. Then they can understand and they can see other children's perspectives as well. So we build on that. Amy, can you show the next slide? So oftentimes parents say, how do I help my kids with self-regulation? I will tell you, if you have a child, they are going to have a time where they are not self-regulating. It may look like a temper tantrum. It may look like a meltdown. As a parent, at some point in your child's life, they will have a meltdown and they will have a temper tantrum. It's just going to be. So the first thing that I say is you can't take that personally. There is a reason always that a child behaves the way they do. There's always a reason for their behavior. So the best thing that you can do as a parent is to keep your composure. And when I say that, I know I say that like, easily. It's probably the hardest thing, especially when your child is out of control. But we talk about downloading your calmness onto them, and modeling that behavior for them is incredibly powerful. And that's how they learn. So when you see your child kind of having a difficult time regulating, if you as a parent can take a breath, sometimes I say, I don't want to breathe. Okay, I'll breathe for you. That is not a time where they can reason. Usually when a child has a temper tantrum, it's because their resources are low, they're hungry, they're tired, or maybe they just didn't get what they wanted. It's normal. As a parent, sometimes we're like, oh, what did I do? Or we're taking it personally. It's not. Every child does this. So to model that regulation, you can even use the terminology from the alert program. My engine level is really high right now. I need to take a breath, or I need a break so that I can come back, and that's okay. So yeah. So if you guys have any questions, that's kind of what I do, and I feel like it's coupled really well with what Amy's doing, and I love it, and I love working with your kids, and they enjoy it too. So they really get into it, and they can breathe. And I say, what do we do if we have a big, strong feeling? And they go, I'm like, yeah, they get it. So, and then I guess if anybody has any questions. Stephanie, did you want to come on for that? I can read some. Stephanie, you're on mute. I can't hear Stephanie. Amy, can you hear Stephanie?
I cannot hear Stephanie.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There you are.
Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to read off some of the questions that we've gotten so far. Let's see. Well, there was a question earlier that was really great, and now it's not on my screen. But basically that question was, have we noticed any increase in sensory issues since the pandemic? Have things gotten worse? Are there any changes? It was something to that effect. I apologize because I'm not seeing it anymore.
Absolutely. Yes, this has definitely impacted, our kiddos in regards to what they were able to do, what they were exposed to. If you think about it, even from these guys are little, their lifespan's been this, and a big chunk of it was maybe they weren't with other kids. So if you're not with other kids, you're not exposed to that level of activity, that level of noise, that level of excitement. And so they may naturally be a little bit more guarded. Also in regards to just, being able to go to preschool or do things, you're a little bit more active sometimes, or, a lot of us were in the house for a good amount of times. You didn't go to different places. You might've gone to playgrounds or whatnot, but So I believe not only have children's motor abilities, but sensory has definitely become heightened, especially with the just stress and anxiety that went along with COVID, and the non-predictability and the lack of routine. These little guys kind of had to be super flexible at a time when their bodies were not able to be that way. So yes, we've seen a big increase.
Great. I have two questions that are very similar. And I love these because this was one of the things that I was trying to tell my teachers when I took over as the director, because all of my infant and toddler teachers felt that, oh my gosh, these kids are too young to start making referrals to OT. And my answer was, no. The earlier you can intervene, the better. But two questions are, how young can you start doing this? And what age can this start?
I would say literally it can start. We even do sensory integration techniques with infants. Of course, that's not the situation here. But when I say, they're not able to do it themselves, but there are some infants that are dysregulated, or they've been in the NICU or so on. So it can start as young as infant and move all the way up. My little one, I have a little one that had sensory needs, and I'm not going to lie, from the get-go, I knew that little nugget, needed my help in that when she was an infant. And then as she grew up, it just changed a little bit. So some kids, you can see it from the get-go, and some kids, it may be a little bit of a, you may see a little bit more prevalence of it when they get in a school situation or so on, when they're around other children, or expectations heighten. That's the other thing. I think that our kids were home with us. So not that we aren't all wonderful parents, but we had jobs to do and so on. And so sometimes they weren't being asked to do things by other people. So there wasn't a level of stress or, a need to do certain things. And then when they got thrown into that, that was a little bit hard for some of them to manage as well, I think. So I hope I answered your question. It can be done as early as when kiddos are infants. There's really not too young of an age. The correct time for intervention, if you're thinking of kind of your pre-K kiddo, and I use this with a lot of parents I talk to on the phone, because they're like, oh, well, my kid moves all the time, or my kid does this all the time, but doesn't that what all pre-K kiddos do? And I say to parents, I said, the deciding factor is often when whatever they're doing might be inhibiting their ability to do what they need to do in their daily environment. So if they're a mover and a shaker, but they can still get through the day and follow the directions and transition and learn new tasks, they may be a mover and a shaker that can filter all that or have all that. But that's oftentimes not the case with some kiddos. They don't want to transition from PE to circle time because their body wants to move. And then that becomes a behavior struggle or a, difficult transition for them. So that's when sometimes OT becomes involved, to just try to figure out what could we do to make transitions easier? What can we do to give them that input so their body doesn't feel dysregulated?
Excellent, thank you. Another question, it says, how can I participate in teaching my child self-regulation as an infant? Is there a time that's too early to start?
I think, yeah, go ahead, Amy. I think you can start as very young. When a kid is having, when a baby is crying and you soothe them or hold them, you're helping them learn how to regulate. What you can even say to them, I see that you are angry, or you seem upset or hungry. You're helping labeling them. You're giving them those words. You're breathing for them. If you, as a parent, and your infant is, crying, and you pick that baby up and you download that calmness to them, you are helping them regulate their emotions just through you. I mean, that is huge.
That's a great answer. I would agree with that 100%.
Okay, well, that is all the questions that I see on our Q&A. I just wanted to also mention that we received this grant through the Jewish Federation of Greater Dallas. So we are extremely thankful to them for that. And this is a 2-year grant. So we've started it this year. We plan to continue it next year. And the exciting thing is that we are hoping next year to expand it into lower and middle school. And we've already had the learning specialists from lower middle school come and talk to me about it, and they are super excited. So this is just amazing stuff that we're doing.
Well, and the ability to be able to start it in pre-K and possibly keep it up through the years, because I feel like when your kids get older, that's when that body awareness and self-regulation becomes even more important. So again, the earlier they can learn some of this, the more effective it is in general. So.
Right. And just for all the parents, the one thing that I had told Amy before we started tonight, my goal is to really kind of help all the parents understand that OT, when we mention it or when we recommend it, we don't want it to be a scary thing. We make referrals to OT for, issues with handwriting, for kids that aren't pressing firm enough, or that we see are struggling with their handwriting. We've made referrals for biting, and that's just a normal part of being in the toddlers. So all kinds of referrals are made to OT for all different reasons. So please don't be scared when we mention it. My goal is to really kind of make this very explainable, very understandable, and to kind of take that fear away from parents when we do talk to you about it. So I hope this helps. Oh, I did get another question. The question is, how important is it to continue OT through the summer?
It depends on the child. And so I think it just completely depends on the child and kind of where they are. Also, we believe a lot in home programs and parent involvement and school involvement. I mean, so if you have, the more people you have on board and the more you're giving your child the input they need, the quicker it's going to happen. I tell people oftentimes, I'm like, if we want to strengthen our core and you drive to the gym one time a week and you do, 20 sit-ups, you're going to drive to the gym one time a week and do 20 sit-ups. It's going to take you, over a year to get to the core place you want. But if you're going to do 20 sit-ups every night for 4 or 5 times a week, you're going to get a lot further faster. And that's the same concept. I believe for sensory, especially, to truly be impactful, it has to be incorporated into the child's day at home and at school. So that's why having this grant and having teachers who are willing to do things is incredible, because your kids are at school for a big chunk of the day. And the more we can load the system with the appropriate sensory input the kiddos needs, the better the regulation gets and the more appropriate the output is. So there's no specific answer on that. It's just kind of how quickly your child responds and the program that whatever the OT is doing, if it's working, because there's more home involvement, school involvement, and so on.
And I think the other important piece is, you being able to come into the classrooms and helping my teachers learn different techniques to help, because a lot of times, my teachers are just like, what do we do with this? So that it has just been amazing. So we're excited about this program. We hope you guys are too.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.